Hey everybody, welcome back to the newest episode of the Pixelists podcast, the podcast where we like to talk about all the nerdy things we enjoy. I'm Will, that's my buddy Blake, and today we're here to talk about a little bit of Exandria Unlimited Calamity. Which
I feel bad. We skipped Kaimal.
Well, we're gonna get to it. We're gonna get to it.
We'll get there.
But it's Calamity time, and I've been so excited to talk to you about this.
I for once watched an episode all the way through on Thursday night. I stayed up late just to watch it. And
so did I, which is funny that today's now the next Thursday, and we both actually watched it on the day it aired, but we just haven't been able to get to it till now, which is mostly my fault. I've been out of town for a few days.
It's that Memorial Day weekend.
That's right, and like we're starting to make a habit of saying, but I'm going to say it again. We got in before the next episode, so it's fine, right?
All that matters, dude. It's all that counts.
Exactly. We made it, and that counts for something. But no, I've been itching to talk to you about this. So excited to talk about it. Like I said, it is now the Thursday that episode 2 is premiering, so we don't have too long to wait for that. Can't wait for it. And I'm ready to just dive in, but I'm trying to think if there's anything else announcement-wise we need to say.
I don't think so. Witcher Season 2? No.
Yeah.
Is it going to get old at some point, joking about this?
Probably already has, but I'm going to still beat that horse.
We're
coming down the
past
pipeline.
It. Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So in that case, let's dive into it. And if you're new to us, if you're new to Critical Role, maybe you're checking out EXU Calamity. That's your first foray into Critical Role content. What am I getting at here? Anyway, what we do here, we talk about each episode, and we also recap each episode. So we're going to be doing that for EXU Calamity, just like we do for the Critical Role campaign proper. And so we cut that recap out and host it separately on YouTube for your viewing convenience. So if you happen to find yourself on that video, hello, thanks for checking us out. But we also have a longer extended form of the podcast where we are going to be theory crafting, discussing, giving our review on the episode. So if you'd like to check that out, we always link that below. I don't think I missed anything there, but I just felt real rusty.
Sounded good to me. Yeah. Let's do this thing.
All right. Yeah. So without further ado, let us now jump into this recap of EXU Calamity, episode 1, Excelsior.
What a name.
I know.
Already sounds epic.
That's right. All right. So the episode opens with Brennan, who is the DM for this series, talking about how this is not going to be a fun one. This is about grief, betrayal, and the coming of a new age. It is a prequel. It takes place before the vestiges of divergence, before the Divine Gate, and before this world was even called Taldore. Welcome to Gusar. Then the episode proper starts, and we're just drutted straight into a sequence with Xerxes, this human paladin. And he's told everything feels slow, and all he can hear is his own breath, but his mouth is filled with blood. And he's just received like a massive blow to the head. Something is wrong, and not just with the situation, but something is wrong in the spirit. And he starts to see blurred shapes come in and out of focus. A building appears, and the city that surrounds it is now a hellscape. Suddenly there's a burst of energy, and it's fast at first, but then slow motion. And Xerxes finds himself just kind of floating through space from this blast. And he's just looking around, looking for anything he can recognize, anything he knows. More explosions, more disconnected moments and time kind of pulsing before him. And finally, he does see something he knows. A boy, 5 years old, red shock of hair. And it's his son. He recognizes this as his son, Alias, sitting with a fishing rod, the line kind of dangling down into this like infinite dark void. Xerxes then fights his way to make his way to his son, and eventually is able to kind of get out of this sluggish, weird slow motion movement and is able to move freely. He calls to his son, and the boy insists that he's just fishing. And Xerxes makes his way to him, is able to look down into this void that his fishing line is going down into, and all he sees are stars. Stars he recognizes. And suddenly he feels this reassuring presence behind him, and a griffin is there, formed of starlight and pure magic, and it basically nuzzles against him. And Xerxes then hears something in Draconic, which he doesn't speak, but he recognizes the word Gordranus, and that like sticks with him. Alias then tells him, Dad, you know I'm not going to look like this when you get home. And then he's like, oh, wait, I think I've caught something. Then suddenly this massive red body crashes down in front of them like the size of a mountain. And it's this gargantuan form writhing in pain. It has horns, and Brennan describes it as older than the world. The figure says, I'm sorry, and my child, I fear I'm too late. Then this massive red figure opens up its hand, and there is like this ghastly projection of a tree that it's creating, an illusion of sorts with its hand. Xerxes now finds himself standing in the hand as well, and behind him there is now a ghostly projection of his husband, Evandrin. Excuse me. And Xerxes recognizes that this is not real. This projection is merely that. It's a memory and not actually happening. But he's still comforted by the fact that, this image of his husband is here. And the image rolls up to this tree that was also projected. And then something just feels wrong. The image of Evandrin like falls down to his knees as if like maybe perhaps being stabbed by something, or something had happened. It clutches its stomach. And then all of a sudden, another massive figure slams down and lands with the red one, its foot on the throat of the horned red figure. Xerxes looks up, and he does not see a face. He instead sees the featureless visage of the sun itself. Presumably the Dawn Father has come down from the heavens as well and is stepping on this red figure's throat. Xerxes is still in the palm of this hand and is like, what's going on? And the sun figure says, turn your eyes away from this sinner. He is beyond redemption. He has betrayed his kin. The horn figure then looks to Xerxes and says, ask yourself, just who did we betray? And then Xerxes lifts up his hand and it's like, stop, towards the sun figure. And all of a sudden, the sun figure is like thrust outwardly and is just like, they're gone. And the red figure is like, you just saved me. What you just did, no mortal can do. Brennan, the DM, then asks kind of just aloud to Xerxes and says, if you look down and see the stars, what are you going to see if you look up? And so then Xerxes kind of makes his way, looks up, and he says that you see the ground fast approaching. And with that, Brennan's like, you wake up. So that entire sequence has been this dream sequence from Xerxes, and he wakes up covered in sweat, writes down the word Gordranus, and then gets up and walks over to the balcony of his tower, which is the tower of the first knight of Avalier. And it's a beautiful day in the city. And we kind of then transition to our next character introduction of Loquacious, which as Xerxes is looking over through the city, he sees all these screens and this massive waterfall at the top of the city. And suddenly an image starts like appearing on the waterfall as if it too is a screen. And we have the image of the changeling Loquacious, who is Sam's character. And Loquacious is basically like a news anchorman that is reporting the news of the city, and he does this every morning. So he starts giving the daily announcements and says it's the eve of the replenishment. There are lots of events and festivities to be had, and then he runs through a couple ad reads. But because he's a changeling, he actually morphs his appearance like into the person that is giving the ad. I think what he specifically does here is like some ad for Orison's glue, and so he turns into Orison. So after he does the announcements, the broadcast ends, and Loquacious turns to his assistant and kind of has a moment where they're running through like all the different things Loquacious has to do, discussing his to-do list, and Most importantly, there are some of like the screens, the crystal columns, I believe they're called, for his broadcast are malfunctioning in one part of the city. And he's like, how has this not been fixed yet? Like, did you tell them like I needed this fixed? And he's like, okay, you know what? I'll just reach out to the arcane architect myself, because, you know, it is my ex-wife. And so he's deciding he's going to go deal with that in person. Then we transition to Laryn, the said arcane architect, and this is Abria's character, and she is this female elf wizard, basically just at work on this massive arcane engine deep beneath the city of Avalier, and she's just staring at it, trying to figure out what else can I like improve, what else can I perfect on this. I've reached the point where basically everything is already perfected, and as she's having that thought, she gets what I want to call a phone call. They've got like these arcane bracelets that essentially are kind of like cell phones. So it rings and she picks it up, and it's just, I think, Guildmaster Akami Ro, and just catching her up on the status of the upcoming conjunction of the two cities. Weather looks good. We should have arrival shortly after 1 a.m. So while she's dealing with that, another man approaches in real life, not through the phone. And he claims he has news. He's just come from the Grand Geometer and says that, hey, you told me that if the reading was ever above a 0.025, you wanted to know immediately. So that's why I'm here. The reading is 0.5. Laryn is stunned by this and is like, okay. And so she heads back to her quarters. And with an Arcana check of 27, she recalls about celestial solstices and how every 20 to 30 years, the veil between realms becomes very thin. But every 120 years, there's something called an apogee solstice where everything aligns and the veil is so thin that like this incredible magic can be achieved. The magical ley lines of Exandria itself can even be remapped in an apogee solstice, and there's just, means crazy things are possible essentially. And what the Grand Geometer is it's this measuring device that measures the shifting of those ley lines. And anything over a 0.025 means that there is a shift happening. And again, like she was just told, it is currently reading 0.5. So Laryn begins to like just weep. This has been everything she's been working for so long, everything she's sacrificed, and now she has so little time to actually take advantage of the moment. But as she's dealing with that, a knock comes at the door, and it is Loquacious, her ex-husband. They've got some typical, ex-married couple back and forth. And as they do, Brennan describes all these spell kites coming into Avalier. And essentially, the two cities, Avalier, Cathmoira, the replenishment means they're coming back, conjoining together, and this is a big, joyous event. And part of it is the people of Cathmoira send up these spell kites, which have food, letters, just cute little items and gifts that float up to the people on Avalier to kind of welcome them back. And as that's happening, we kind of have another transition of kites arriving at the Vault of the Golden Scythe. And the Vault of the Golden Scythe, is this just place of unfathomable wealth. There are countless automatons buzzing around, wheelbarrows full of perfect diamonds and gold. Brennan even mentions a bridled unicorn. And at the center of all of this is Nidus, who is a human male sorcerer / bard. And he is the guildmaster of this place. And he is quickly approached by his chief bookkeeper, who tells him that they are over budget on wands and they need to figure this out. Nidus is like, it's the replenishment, spare no expense, like do what needs to be done. And Nidus handles a few other little like business fires that need to put out as he is the guildmaster. Before finally another man comes up to him, Magister Milas Friend. And Nidus doesn't recognize this person. He even rolls a history check and is told, yeah, you don't know who this person is. He's nobody. So Nidus is like almost offended that this like nobody would come ask him for a favor. And he's like, this man is far below my station, and like, how dare you even ask? He doesn't say that to him, but that's kind of how he feels. And because that is the situation, Nidus's assistant barges in and interrupts to kind of save him from the moment. Now, once again, we transition and we are heading on over to Cloudstone, which is this large marble building with a massive like eye overhead. It's not a place of magic and robes or arcane, but more weaponry. Brennan describes it as magic does not echo here. It is a place of sharp clarity. And here we're introduced to Guardian of the Seventh, Senior Sight Warden of the Eyes of Avalier, Sarat. And he is a male Eusphora, like a bird person. And he walks into this room with a collection of artifacts, magical items, and just ruined items all floating around in this pure white room of marble.
It's very Minority Report-esque.
Yes, exactly. I thought the same thing. And a half-orc named Orwin walks up to Sarat, and the half-orc actually refers to Sarat as Pinch, which is one of his nicknames. So he asks Pinch about... Orwin reports about his time over Vasselheim and says that, hey, the Archmage Vespan Chloros has gone missing. The people of Vasselheim are worried about this. They're worried that maybe some heresy against the gods has taken place, and they want us to check to see if maybe Chloros is hiding here. Rumor has it that Chloros maybe tried to replicate the matron's ritual. Orwin then asks, actually, where did we get all this stuff? And he's told that a member of the Ring of Silver said it needed to be saved for like posterity and academic reasons. Sarat then says, all right, light it up. And in the center of the hall, using pure transmutation magic, meaning this is not an illusion, but an actual one-to-one replication, the sanctum of Vespan Chloros is recreated in perfect detail. Sarat then investigates the scene, kind of like swiping through the room, and with a very high investigation check, he notices that there are glyphs, both of celestial and infernal origin, and something else on the floor that is like very badly corroded and nearly destroyed. He examines that and notices that it has been disenchanted, and it was formerly much larger. With his really high roll, though, he realizes that this item wasn't specifically disenchanted. However, there was some wave of energy that just as a byproduct happened to disenchant anything that it passed through, just due to proximity. And for something to have done that, Sarat recognizes that it had to be extremely powerful. He also notices the remnants of what appears to be a summoning circle that was also eradicated by this wave. And recognizing these things, Sarat tells Orwin, like, hey, nobody can know about this yet. Like, I need to run this by some people higher up first. And then we transition to the pinnacle of Avalier, this magical floating city, where we see the Archsept, home to the most powerful wizards in the city, and before it is this massive statue of Emir the Bold, who is the wizard whose magic lifted Avalier into the sky originally. And at the foot of this statue is the Archmage of the Librarium Incantatum, Pasha, a middle-aged elven woman and granddaughter to Emir. She unexpectedly sees Eladmir the Wise, one of the true seven, which is like there's seven like leading wizards of this whole city. And Eladmir tells Pasha, it's a pleasure to meet you face to face. He knew her grandfather, and basically starts telling her a few stories that she already knows, but is just being polite. And with the small talk, they then get into, how is everything coming along for the replenishment and yada, yada, yada. But Eladmir also has a couple of apprentices with him, and one of those says, hey, Aor may be preparing an attack on Lathris. Pasha, do you have something up your sleeve for this? Now may be the time to use it. He then also mentions that artifacts from Vasselheim have made their way into the city, into the possession of Sarat. And explains that these items may have been used to replicate the Maiden's ritual. That's the rumor going on. Eladrin is concerned by this news and tells Pasha that, hey, anything you learn about that, you come tell like me directly. Like, don't use the usual channels. Like, come tell my apprentice or me. And with that, having introduced all of the members of this cast here, we go into the first half break. And
oh my gosh.
I tried to get through that as quickly as possible, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many amazing details that Brennan described. So great job. There's definitely, if you're watching the replay, you need to watch the whole thing, by the way, because it's great. But
Yeah.
Picking up from the break, if you've been wondering at this point, how are all these people going to get together? It's because on the eve of the replenishment, which is, like Will mentioned, it's when Avalier is basically going to land. I think of like the spaceship from the first Star Wars, like the big ring that young Anakin goes into. It's kind of like that, and it lands around the city of Kathmoira, and like all of the ether it's built up, it like releases into the land, and that's the replenishing. And so the night before that happens, they have this big party called the Parade of Beasts. Including a specific dinner called the Feast of Emir. So the way the party all gets together is they are all arriving at Excelsior Plaza, specifically at the Palazzo Porco, where they're going to have this feast. And you find out that all of these people are part of, really, they're like a band who gets together and they talk about stuff going on in the city. And they've met plenty of times before. It's a little vague, Xerxes spot on this group, because they mention that it's one of he's brand new to this title of First Knight. It's not really clear exactly what that title means, but he's clearly, like, because of his either courage or like his proficiency in battle, he's risen to this rank where now he's part of this council, I guess. But so the party, they arrive at this feast, and they all arrive, think about like red carpet arrival, at the Oscars. That's kind of what it's like.
Yeah.
And so Loquacious, who also goes by Quay, when he arrives, he kind of feigns this like, oh no, like all this attention, but secretly he like really loves it. And, his ex-wife's kind of bitter because he's got like this young girl named Bolo, who's like hanging on his arm. And it's kind of like your cliche, like idiot young girlfriend in the movies, I guess. So she's asking all these questions. He's enduring the reporters. Sarat just sort of flies in kind of unnoticed. And Xerxes comes in on his griffin. And so once the party has kind of all made their way to the feast, they do eventually kind of steal away and get together and begin talking about, hey, what's going on in the city? And Will mentioned an interesting detail about Loquacious noticing certain not cameras or like TV screens, but like certain elements not working in the city. They also mention how they haven't heard from, and I can't remember the name of it, the Hall of. Know it, Will? Basically it's a division in the city where the people who can sort of have prophetic vision can see what's going to happen, right. Or it's not quite clear if it's like that, if it's that deliberate, but that they have like a gift of foresight basically, and that those doors have been closed. They haven't heard anything from those people in some time. It's kind of odd considering it's in the city. Also, Xerxes mentions the dream that he had and basically says, I think I dreamt of like a war between the prime deities and the betrayer gods. And the party, since they don't know him quite well enough, are kind of thrown by this, but I think it's Sarat who kind of determines this. This is a bit detailed, and it's kind of unlike Xerxes just to make up a dream. So they talk about that, and specifically, Xerxes mentions the draconic expression Gordronish, which they realize means gathering of shadows. And the lore behind that is that when one of the betrayer gods was sealed, so to speak, like sealed in the depths of, in Exandria's world, hell, basically. He basically, like in his final words, said that he would gather his shadows to him. And it was basically like an expression of like omen, of like returnal, basically. And so that expression has a very, very apprehensive connotation around it that they discuss. They also know that, Sarat mentions some of the artifacts that they picked up from the home of Vespan Chloris from Vasselheim. And specifically, they're curious about this guest coming to the party named Pervan Sol, who is a champion of the Raven Mother. Is that right? Did I say that right?
Yeah. The Raven Queen, like the matron of ravens.
Matron of ravens. Thank you. And so they're curious about this guy. They want to meet this guy. And essentially what ends up happening is, as parties tend to do, the party actually does split up to kind of cover a couple of like the most important things. Specifically, actually, before this happens, I will mention that Laryn, who's noticed sort of like the spectrometer reading, realizing that there's these artifacts from Vespan Chloris, is immediately intrigued and is kind of like, I think she even makes a comment like, that's what I need for like the next steps of like what's coming, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's not meant in like a very it's not meant like in an evil way. It's just like, because this is like a massive moment in history, that's probably the perfect item that I will need. And I should also mention, without getting too in the weeds, there's a lot of also references to the different like governing bodies within the city. There's comments on like the Court of Owls who are present. There's something called the Ring of Silver mentioned. I think there's also like a Ring of Gold mentioned. Yep. So I wonder if there's a Ring of Bronze. I don't know if they mentioned one, but I remember thinking like, I wonder if there's one. And these are sort of like different like echelons of like authority within the city. And they also do find out that this sort of rusted, burned away item was formerly a bow. And it was a bow, I think, of like a solar champion or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think they're just called solars.
Yeah. But
they're like angels, kind of.
Exactly. I think of like a celestial angel who has a bow. Yeah. A Cupid you don't want to mess with, I guess. But all that to say, Xerxes and Loquacious, basically, they want to go talk to Pervan Sol. And specifically, Xerxes is apprehensive around this dream. And so he's thinking, this is someone that I can talk to who has sort of a connection to the prime deities. And yeah, really, I just want to know what's going on. So they go off to talk to him. And in this conversation, this is a character who has a pet wolf, basically.
Yeah.
The dude's cool. There's a really fun like back and forth between Brennan and Loquacious, where Loquacious is kind of like, hey, would you give like a exclusive interview? It's just a great character.
Yeah.
But Pervan basically admits that they are aware already of Vespan Chloris, but there's something different about Vespan Chloris. And it's basically implied that since the Raven Queen's ascension to godhood, that there have been an endless number of, think of like drunk mages who are just like, I'm gonna do that. And so there's kind of like this sort of not laughing stock, but kind of like this like joking or camaraderie around like, oh, another one of those, like these crazy people trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But he points out that that's not the case with Vespan Chloris, that something was different here. And it's got the deities spooked a bit because, and we get a bit of the background too on the matron of ravens, how when she ascended and then she actually killed the previous god and quote like smote his name from like the history books, so to speak, in a very epic way. And Pervan Sol basically says that the deities have all spoken and none of them felt any kind of intrusion on their domain. Yeah. So the way the conversation goes then is that Vespan Chloris wasn't trying to ascend to become a god and take out one of the prime deities, but that he actually potentially descended to the realm of the betrayer gods, either to take one's place or to maybe even free one. So it's pretty clear that Vespan's not a good dude. But Pervan basically also implies like, hey, the people you make your company with aren't to be trusted. Like these are, I think he calls them like a brood of vipers. Like these are very greedy people, and you would do well to just be mindful of who you keep your company with. So That happens. Separately, at the feast, there are these automatons. I can't think of what they're called. There was an actual like expression for them. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
he
remember.
kept calling them like his scarecrows or something, but there was some other word.
They were scarecrow-esque, but there was an actual name for them.
Yeah.
But regardless, Hamadad.
Oh yeah.
Hamadans, yeah, or
Yeah.
something. We get it. Well, there's this one automaton who's basically serving drinks and like suddenly glitches, and there's something very odd about it because this is very uncommon. This is an uncommon sight, and then it basically falls over and sort of deactivates, and all the champagne it's holding like spills out. Sarat, who I have thought of as kind of like the Tom Cruise detective of Minority Report, immediately notices like something's off here. He scoops up the automaton, takes it to a private room, and then rolls an investigation check, or possibly a perception check. And he also has 2 class abilities that also enhance that check. And he rolls a 31. It's a crazy high roll. And with the 31, he's looking it over, and Brennan, our GM, mentions, "You're not alone in this room." Brennan has an absolutely amazing description of how the invisibility spell works, and basically says that to cast invisibility, you can't be perfectly invisible. You have to still let your pupils be exposed so that the light can come in. You can actually still see. And so with the 31, Sarat is looking in a mirror, and he notices behind him these 2 tiny pupils behind him, like the size of a grain of sand. Immediately pulls his axes, slashes, kills this person, which, it could have been a good person. I don't know, but kills him. Dude falls over, and coming out of the invisibility spell is this ragged shell of a person who's been mutilated. Lips have been cut off. Eyes are orange and bloodshot. He's got patches of skin that are sort of like stitched together.
Ugh.
And it's just this dead body in front of him. And then he hears this voice behind him that says, "You'll never reach the Wild Mother's embrace in time." And he looks, and in the mirror is sort of like this swirling fog, and he sees the mutilated face of Vespan Chloris. There's this great moment where Brennan actually screams and reaches at Travis, and Travis screams, and the mirror basically cracks. Vespan disappears. And that is where our episode ends of Calamity, episode 1, Excelsior.
Man, it was so good.
It was amazing. It's so much to talk about. By the way, if you're just checking our recap, you want to see the whole discussion, which why wouldn't you? This has been an amazing entry into this 4-part series. Check the link below. See the whole video that we're talking about today. Well, I got some bad news.
You hated it?
I think Brennan might be a challenger for the throne that is Matt Mercer's DM-ship. He was dang good.
He was incredible. I think he definitely belongs in the conversation. I've never watched Dimension 20 or any of the other shows that he's a DM of, but it sounds like I need to check it out because he absolutely blew me away. He was incredible.
My wife watched with me too, and she basically kept being like, "Oh my gosh, like this guy he's kind of unassuming. Like I just didn't know what to expect." And then I was like, "This guy might be a serial killer." He's like, he's so good at like everything.
Yeah, the whole episode was just great. And I think it's a lot Brennan's skill, the whole cast's skill, really. But obviously Brennan is kind of the one captaining the ship, so got to give him a lot of credit. But also, it's just so cool, and these things all play together. But it's also just so cool that this is a high level one shot, for lack of a campaign, I guess, and not only high level but like high importance. Right. So I feel like all those things are coming together to make like this really cool experience. So not to take anything away from Brennan, give him all the credit, but I also just think that the stakes kind of are also attributing to just like how epic this felt. All this lore that just got dumped on us in the best way. Not
Right.
Don't mean that in a bad way at all. He layered it in with such like care and finesse, and I don't know. I'm repeating myself now, but I just think the expert level of him and the cast, the high stakes, the high level, all this like groundwork world lore that we're finding out. I feel like it was all just this beautiful chemistry of an amazing episode. I think one episode in, definitely probably top 10 Critical Role episodes for me.
Yeah, it was amazing. And you mentioned the stakes. I mean, obviously we know a bit of the background of the Calamity, so it's a bit implicit of like, okay, and they've also said like, hey, this is not a happy ending type of story.
Yeah.
And you and I joked about this is like very much Halo Reach vibes, so we kind of have an insight into maybe where this is going. But despite that, I again, hats off to the team, because you really kind of feel that tension and those stakes in this episode. I mean, that could have been easily mishandled or just not recognizable. And yet I'm really waiting for the other shoe to drop, I guess. Like, it really feels, I mean, Laryn being excited about this like spectrometer reading. I'm like, okay, well, that's probably really bad, actually. I mean, and also I loved like the lore behind that, which we'll have to talk about that specific detail of the apogee solstice for campaign 3, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty much everything that was happening. I was like, okay, that's going to be really bad. Okay, that's going to be really bad. We mentioned like the TVs like not working in certain areas. That one particular hall that's like gone totally silent. It definitely feels like we're on the edge of doom.
The Calamity.
And, I mean, that is credit to the whole team. I mean, they have definitely they presented that first episode really well to sort of set the stage. Yeah,
absolutely. And golly, the first 15 minutes of the first episode just came out swinging. Right. I'm sure we'll discuss that specifically, I'm sure too, but just while we're getting our initial thoughts out still, that was incredible. So we talked about Brennan. I also was not familiar with Luis Carrizo or Lou Wilson, the two new players. Abria, I guess, is new, but if you've been watching Critical Role, you're familiar with her already. They all killed it, Right. I mean, everyone in the cast killed it, but special shout out to the new people, since I wasn't familiar with them either. But it was just so good. Like everyone's character, like I just previously mentioned, is high level, or also like high renown, I guess I could say. Like they all seem very important, and I loved how I kind of touched on it in the first half recap, but like I would say Brennan did like 70% of like the heavy lifting in those moments, but they brought a lot too, like sure. each one of them kind of had like fires to put out as their character like would deal with. And I just sat there being like, man, they're all so good and have like so much. It feels like they've sat in these characters for a long time, and that this isn't episode 1.
Laryn and Loquacious are really good at being divorced.
Yeah.
So
that was great. And I don't know. I just, not to get above the table here, but part of me just wondered, like, I wonder if all those things were discussed prior to, like, was Brennan like, okay, Nidus, as the guildmaster of this thing, here's all these things that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Like, here's what, blah, blah, blah. Versus how much of that was kind of like improv in the moment of like, all right, take care of these wands, like do that kind of stuff. Was just impressive, regardless of which explanation it is.
I don't think there was probably, let's get real. It's a 4-episode series, so there's probably like, they're probably not totally in the dark. And you and I talked about, I don't know if you hear my kid cry in the background, but you and I talked about in that Critical Role Campaign 3 episode where it was they were doing the heist and it was like the journal of Vespan Chloris and everyone was like, oh, and you were like, there has to be.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there has been communication. I think there has been dialogue. I think like Nidus, for example, like with the wands, I think it's probably the conversation is like, okay, let's build the character together. Okay, great. Now here's the position you fill. This is who your character, like sort of his authority, I guess, so to speak. Yeah. And then, and that was probably collaborative. I don't think it was like necessarily handed to him, but
yeah, I imagine so as well.
I think the reactions, like especially like we didn't mention it in the recap, but when they were talking about the wands, they were negotiating on like, how can we maybe get some extra wiggle room on this deal? I think that was probably all just natural skill set and just coming up with it on the fly, and which again speaks to they're all very much deserving of being at the table, and it's a different vibe from EXU originally, for better or worse. It's a different vibe, I think, because you have people who seem to I don't know Nidus's and Xerxes like their backgrounds in terms of D&D, but with the EXU originally you had two characters who had never played before and were like, I've never played before, and in those first couple episodes there was even like, so that's what advantage means. I should have rolled it again. Right. And so, which again, nothing against that cast, but I think it is a bit of an interrupter compared to what we've seen so far in this first episode, which has felt like a cinematic story already. But I guess we'll see when combat happens, if that still holds up. So.
Yeah, 100% though. I know what you're saying. Like I'm just going to repeat myself all day today, I guess, but they all were like experts, like their characters, and also the way like their portrayal of them. And that's not to say that. I mean, everyone messes up rules, so I'm sure we'll get some of that in combat and what have you. But
yeah, I love Ashley Johnson, but she's always like, wait, so
yeah.
Anyway,
but so Lou Wilson, I think, and again, I've never watched Dimension 20, so y'all please correct me down below, but I think he's one of like Brennan's regular players. Luis might be as well, but I'm just not sure on that one. But Lou, I know at least has some experience, and seems like Luis might as well, or he just is a very quick learner, because it was all so natural. It felt to me like the pilot episode of like a Game of Thrones level show. Like I'm getting introduced with all these names and concepts. Right. Obviously I'm bringing some knowledge to the table because of Critical Role, but really not that much because we don't know the bureaucracies of how the Avalier was run and stuff. And I just thought that with so much information, so much new things, I never felt like completely bogged down in like what's happening here, which I think is a testament to Brennan's ability to kind of.
Right. It makes me wish we had, like, I'm ready for the Avalier publication or, Calamity. Like, I want to dig in on like the different, levels of authority and like different organizations and, Ring of Silver, Ring of Gold. Like, okay, so like, is that something that you ascend into, or like, are you assigned into it and like that's your now rank for the rest of your life? Or these are just things I think about. But you make a good point though. I never felt like, okay, wait, pause it, hang on. Like it was slight enough to accentuate the world building without it feeling like you said, like bogging down the story.
Yeah. And man, I hope you're right. I hope there is like a source book or an addendum or something they put out about this pre-Calamity time, because I just want to. It's such a cool world that Matt's built, and I want to know more about it.
Yeah, and speaking of like the world itself, I think I read a tweet confirming that the horned red-faced figure is Asmodeus. Which I guess what I'd read was that they couldn't directly
maybe can't use that name specifically.
Yeah, right, something to that effect, but that it basically was Asmodeus, which my wife, funny enough, just a random coincidence, in our D&D campaign, her character's home has been basically invaded by Asmodeus, And so she
Oh,
was like, Asmodeus? I was like, yeah,
that's crazy.
There's a rich D&D history. I mean,
Yeah.
it's nothing new, I guess. But anyway.
But yeah, that's freaking awesome. More on, I guess,
Yeah, I guess we tabled
Asmodeus in a minute.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, we're just waxing poetic, I guess, on things now. I think it's clear we both really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we can move on to more concrete things. I mean, I don't even know where to start. I guess just the characters. I thought they were all amazing. Like we're getting 3 more episodes with them, so I'm excited for that. But like we already mentioned, these are probably not going to end well for these people. So I'm already sitting here thinking like, man, I would love like a prequel to this to show like how did Sarat become like the site warden, and how did Xerxes become the first knight of Avalier. They're all so cool.
Right.
And I don't really know where I'm going with this topic of conversation, but just I thought everyone was amazing.
What happened to Evandrin, his husband?
Yeah.
Because it seems like it's still not necessarily recent, but like the pain is obviously still pretty tangible. It's also not clear his relationship with his son, like what happened there. I think it was implied that the son is, I guess, while he's maybe doing the duties of first knight, his son maybe lives with, I think, was it Nidus's sister-in-law and her husband or something to that effect?
Oh, I didn't put that together, but
yeah, I think
I know
I think Nidus gets like a letter or something, either from his brother-in-law or his sister-in-law.
Yeah, he does.
And basically, like, I think passed it along to Xerxes, saying that like, Elias was doing well, but that he's at a tender age, and so he's been a little sensitive lately, or something to that effect. So again, it's very subtle, so I don't know if I pieced that together right.
No, I mean, clearly he's with someone, which we assume again that Evandrin is not alive. So I'm sure that is what's going on. That's really interesting. I didn't pick up on that. But yeah, to me, based on at the very beginning of the episode, he's like, Dad, I don't look like this anymore. I think because he probably hasn't seen him in like 7 years, because that's like the amount of time the cities are apart or something. Which maybe he's seen him in the interim, but
yeah, he said that he was turning, I think 14 or 15 years old, which I was like, okay, good, his son's alive.
Yeah,
for now.
Yeah, this is why I need a prequel, so we can find out about how everything got here, which we maybe find out all the things we want to know within these episodes anyway. But just also good.
Yeah.
Also good. And is there anything else specific you wanted to say on them? Sorry, I'm looking at my notes.
On characters?
No, I mean,
not
whatever.
particular. I mean, I'm curious. I mean, just echoing what you said about prequel content would be even better. I mean, Pasha's grandfather, Amir. I mean, there seems like some really great content there. And maybe these are just characters that are going to get referenced, in another chunk of EXU content, another like 1-shot or 2-shot or what have you. So
that's a great point. I mean, why not? Like, why not have the next EXU be even set before this, and maybe we get Lou and Luis coming back and some new people.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
It is cool. Just how advanced. Like, I just never really thought of Taldore or like current times Critical Role as like post-apocalypse.
Yeah.
But comparing it to just the subtle details that really just imply just how advanced Avalier and the different kingdoms are, it definitely gave me a vibe of like, oh, like this kind of is like in a post-apocalyptic world that people have kind of like pieced back together. Because you really haven't, or at least I haven't, and not having seen all of Critical either. Maybe this is the case, but Avalier seems like leaps and shoulders above anything else we've seen so far in Critical Role.
Yeah, for sure. It is definitely. It's it is. You don't really get the post-apocalyptic vibe like you're just sitting in with Critical Role But I mean, kind of that is what happened, right? Like
Right.
shit completely crumbled, and now I don't know the exact amount of years, but it's been hundreds of years, and so like
Yeah.
civilization is now just starting to maybe kind of get back there.
And wasn't it implied that like the floating cities all fall, right? They all crash, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we don't necessarily know the link with because we know there's Broomstone at this time, because I think
Right.
was it Laryn who has like the jewelry of Broomstone.
Yeah.
So we know it's present, but I am curious, like, what causes the cities to fall, and why does it? Why have we not seen like that kind of landscape in today's Critical Role world, with the presence of Broomstone still accessible?
Right. My not that you were asking for an answer, but my best guess there was, well, they fell because of the Calamity and this massive
Right.
like war, right? And then I think like the technology was lost. I mean, because
Yeah.
we've got Broomstone, which obviously is being utilized, but obviously Emir used his magic to make it happen. So there must be like a vast amount
Right.
of magic that, in addition to the Broomstone, allows stuff like this to happen. And so I
Well,
guess
and
just
isn't there like a comment too in Calamity about maybe I'm like pulling this from somewhere else entirely, but I think there's like some conversation, maybe when they're talking about, because it gets mentioned a few times, this conversation of Vespan Chloros and like people trying to replicate the Raven Queen's ascension. And someone, maybe it's Laryn, makes a comment that's basically along the lines of like, why do people still do this? Like, we're basically like, why would anyone want to become a god? Like, we pretty much already are.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. There was a
comment
comment
like
like that.
that. That's like, dude, do you know like the world we live? Like, we're so advanced.
Yeah.
Which I think is such a great line, by the way, in terms of like the implication of or the foreshadowing of like this apocalypse of biblical proportions. It's kind of like a Tower of Babel kind of feel to it. But yeah, I guess, you think about Emir and the comment of him, like with his magic, he lifted the city. I guess with the Calamity, it's not just like a loss of technology, it's a loss of, it's the age of Arcanum. So like a loss of literal ether, but a loss of like arcane energy and
like arcane knowledge and stuff too, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm kind of just rambling at this point, but
that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a rich episode. I feel like we could just grab a couple of beers and just be like, so what about that part?
Yeah, 100%.
Or, Brennan Lee Mulligan being like, oh, the god of jerking off or whatever. Like his side characters were so great. Yeah.
But yeah, 100%. And I'm going to kind of use that as a bit of a segue, but, as always, just interrupt me, or, if you had something else, go for it. But speaking of Vespan Chloros, now, for those of you that have been watching Blake and I talk about all of Campaign 3, Blake referenced it earlier during the Museum Heist episode. The Journal of Vespan Chloros came up, and we were like, how do they know that name? Like, the cast doesn't remember anything. So we theorized that they must know that from The Legend of Vox Machina. Obviously now we know that it's from this, more than likely that they referenced that. But anyway, back then I postulated that maybe that was Vecna. I gotta wind that back now because that was incorrect. The timelines do not line up. And
do we know Vecna's original persona?
We do not still, because similar to Asmodeus, I don't think they can use the name Vecna, which was one of the reasons why I was like, oh, Vespan is going to be, Vecna or whatever. But now having seen this, and I probably could have figured it out before this, but this made it abundantly clear that Vespan is not Vecna, because Vecna's shenanigans, or at least the main ones for this time era, would have already happened.
Yeah,
and Vecna was trying to replicate what the Matron of Ravens did and usurp a prime deity. Here we know that was not what Vespan was doing. We still don't know like for certain what Vespan's doing, but it seems like trying to usurp a betrayer god. So the point of this soliloquy was just, one, to correct a previous theory, but two, just to kind of get us on
Remember, we don't talk about our losses. We only
That's
talk
right.
about our wins as loud as we
That's
can,
right.
even when they're randomly occurring.
But just to get us on the subject of Vespans, so like, I mean, this kind of encroaches on a bunch of other subjects of this episode, but I mean, I think you and I are at least probably on the same page that that's what he's doing, trying the ritual, but with the betrayer god. But
I think Sam's character did a good job of kind of. I think even Xerxes directly asked Pervon, like, just tell us what you mean in as clear terms as possible, and he still did it. And Xerxes is like, why didn't he just say that? Like, what's the deal? But Loquacious does a good job of kind of summing everything up, and that seems to be the case for sure. Is either usurping a betrayer god, possibly what we saw, Asmodeus in pain in the opener,
in the opening sequence,
maybe there's a connection there with that. But yeah, I mean, some kind of he's got a bad plan because he's a bad dude. So, because I wondered if he'd be kind of like a tragic character, like had the best of intentions and like unleash the calamity. But I think it's safe to say he's full blown evil.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and I assume these are things we're going to find out, but I'm curious, like, was that his goal to usurp a betrayer god, and did he succeed? Or,
right.
we know that the results of his actions are that all the betrayer gods escape and the calamity happens. So, like, did he fail, but that was a byproduct? Was that what he was trying to do?
Right.
And, like, maybe he did succeed, and one of these betrayer gods that we've always thought was X has actually been Vespan Chloris since this moment. What's interesting is that he's still alive in some form or fashion because he showed up in the mirror, which I got very like Voldemort vibes from that moment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But go ahead.
I was also wondering why he was so interested in Sarat as well. I guess because he had the artifacts, right, from his ritual.
I was wondering that too, and so I didn't know if that was why, or maybe just because Sarat just kind of foiled whatever was happening by killing that invisible cultist. So maybe he like showed up to be like, "You'll never do this in time," type of thing. But yeah, is Sarat? Does he in possession of the?
I think Laryn asked.
Oh right, Laryn has it, right?
I don't know if he actually gave it to her or not. I can't remember if he actually handed it over. But there's for the implication of this group to kind of like, hey, we get together and we talk about all things happening. There seems to be some mistrust there because even in that exchange, there wasn't like total transparency. It was kind of like, hey, I need that, and it was like, I don't know, I'm going to give you that. But so I don't know if he actually handed it over or not.
They seem kind of like, for lack of a better analogy here, kind of like the Illuminati of the city. Like they're all these like very powerful people from different things that, for whatever reason are working together. But I do get the idea that they're friends, but I think they definitely like wouldn't get to where they are without like kind of having eyes in the back of their head. So I'm sure they're kind of just mistrustful.
Yeah,
to some extent, just because.
Well, I mean, they're even like, Xerxes' dream. They're even kind of like questioning, like, is this guy for real? So maybe mistrust is too strong of a word. There's definitely like a, I don't know, just like a sense of, I guess, ascertaining motivations between the group. And then I guess like, unlike the Illuminati, I didn't fully get the impression that they like actually control the city. But like maybe like in their various positions, like they got together and they were like, hey, like we realize all of us can do some pretty good things for the city. So let's kind of pool our resources a bit. Because, they mentioned like the seven, I can't remember the actual description like of the seven. But I don't know where I'm going with this, but
there's a lot
today.
A lot of pieces to move around here. But I'm trying to think. Vespan, I think we'll clearly find out more of what's happening there. But I think the main thing I'm interested in is the fact that he's not dead. Like the fact that he survived what he was attempting to do, at least in some form or fashion, makes me think that he was successful. And so I'm just curious as to what the goal actually was. Like, was it to usurp, or was it to just unleash? But not Vecna. So got that out of the way. Where was I going from here? Okay, yeah. Oh, sorry. The dream sequence at the beginning. I wanted to talk about that a little bit, and I guess this ties to Vespan as well. Asmodeus, however you say it, is clearly like in a weakened position. The Dawn Father come down's crushing on his throat. Just a cool visual moment to show that this war between the gods is coming, or more relevant than that, in that maybe Asmodeus was the one Vespan was trying to swap with.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a double meaning there, because it could be totally unrelated, and he's writhing in pain because, it's interesting. It's obviously not just a dream. There's either some kind of implication of meaning there, or it's foreshadowing the war that's going to come. But Asmodeus weakened, presumably maybe because of Vespan Chloris, but also he's getting beat up by the Dawn Father.
Yeah.
So I don't know the reason for the pain. I do think it's a neat detail positioning Asmodeus as the victim.
Yeah.
And being put to death, essentially, and Xerxes, having to stand up for the little guy, so to speak. Doesn't really apply here, but intervening basically, and Asmodeus being grateful, knowing some of the lore behind Asmodeus as a corrupter and a trickster, and basically the devil. To me, the implication I got is that Asmodeus is going to take advantage of Xerxes in some way, and manipulate him in some way. We saw his son was present. Evandrin was present. So like the two people who are closest to him are also involved in this dream sequence, which also implies to me that these are going to be, pieces on the chessboard that Asmodeus is going to use for his manipulation. I don't know if this is a reach or not. It's just, I think it's too simple to just be like, oh, the story we've heard this whole time has been wrong, and Asmodeus is actually one of the good guys, and the Dawn Father's evil, which was kind of the implication. It's like, who did we betray? Anyway, what do you think about the whole thing?
I'm kind of on the same page as you. It was such a weird, what's the word? Like reversal of what you would expect. And as you mentioned, Asmodeus is the Lord of the Hells, and, manipulation and stuff. So I was wondering, like, is this all just a manipulative tactic? Like maybe the Dawn Father was never even really there, and this is all just a way to get Xerxes on his side or whatever, for whatever reason.
Because wasn't it mentioned that Xerxes doesn't have a deity that he follows?
Yeah, I think so. Which is interesting because he's a paladin.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Which also, to me, just even more points to his proclivity to be manipulated.
Yeah, and obviously we haven't spent too much time with the character yet to really know them, but Xerxes seems like a really honorable, do the right thing type of guy. Like,
right.
I thought Luis did such a great job. As one of my in an episode full of really memorable and cool characters, he honestly stuck out to me the most. What am I getting at? So I want to know what's going on there. Is it just as simple, and not that this would be simple, but is it just that that's all manipulative tactics and Asmodeus is just trying to mess with his head? Or is there really some not that the Dawn Father's evil and Asmodeus is good, but is there more gray to the story there that we're lacking? And maybe just a dream, maybe just manipulation, but Xerxes banishing away the Dawnfather, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, he even says, like, no mortal can do what you've just done. Like, what's going on there? And this is...
Yeah, I didn't read it that way. Did he say no one could do what you just did, or did he say no one would do what you've just done?
I have it here in my notes. Let me see real quick.
Okay. Because I just rewatched it, the intro, just because I loved it the first time. But the implication I got was just like, no one would have been as generous as you have just been with my life.
Yeah, I mean, that could definitely be the implication. I swear I just had this. Where I don't know where it is though. All right. Okay. I found all I said in my notes was the figure notes that no mortal can do what Xerxes has just done. So that's my words. So it is possible that I, you know.
Well, either way, I mean, yeah, he's the first knight, so he's clearly gifted, right? But I can only assume we're going to find out some information more about this potential relationship between him and Asmodeus, or his role to play in this whole thing. Doesn't seem like it's a reoccurring dream. Seems like it's just the first time he's dreamt something like that. But there's only 4 episodes total. So like this thing, I think we've had some incredible foundation setting happening. I can only assume this thing's going to kick off really fast tonight.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder if maybe they're going to avoid combat until, you know, the 3rd or 4th episode, because with that many people at a table, it can really eat up a lot of time, and it feels like there's a lot to get through. So, but I don't know. I mean, it could be some every session for all I know.
Yeah.
So
very true. I'm interested to kind of see the balance there now that you brought that up. But one other quick home run, like super reach, is we know that in terms of Xerxes being able to like banish the Dawnfather, let's call it, we know that there was potentially a ritual performed to usurp a god. Is there any chance that Xerxes somehow in this chaos like is the one that has been imbued with godlike powers for whatever reason?
I would say no, because there's nothing else that implies that happened.
Just you wait.
But I told you, we don't talk about our losses here. I have been saying since day one that yeah, we'll see what's special about him, if there is something special about him.
Yeah.
So,
and again, this could all be tossed up to manipulation, but what role did his husband have to play in this, that Asmodeus was taking the time to share that memory or whatever it was?
Well, to me, that just speaks to the manipulation piece of it. You know, it speaks like, hey, I understand. I'm, you know, here I am defenseless and weak, and I'm going to show you someone else you knew who was at one point defenseless and killed. So I think it's very clever DMing by Brennan to connect Xerxes with Asmodeus. Presumably we'll get a little bit of the background of what happened there, but yeah. So
that'd be interesting.
I want to ask you about I think we're like already over an hour on this.
The recap was long.
I want to ask you about the apogee solstice, because that was a nice little detail on how not all solstices are the same, but every now and then you have like the mega solstice. I was curious, do you think we're heading towards something like that in campaign 3, or with Vecna and campaign 1, do you think that may have been what happened in the first season or the first campaign?
I don't know. I mean, these solstices keep coming up, and this is the first time that this apogee one has ever been mentioned, at least to my knowledge. So I would say that if you gun to my head and made me guess, I don't think it was what was happening in campaign 1. To me, I think it was probably just, unless retroactively we're going to like say that, but at the time it wasn't made that big of a deal of. In campaign 3 though, maybe, because from EXU, original EXU, with like the Oh No Plateau and just all this weird realms bleeding into each other, which is what happens during a normal solstice. But it kind of feels like this would be a great setup to be like the last time this happened was the Calamity, and now we've thousands of years later we're up to the next one or whatever. But yeah, I'm super. I know I'm rambling here. So we have whatever Vespan is doing that, at least in some form or fashion, knocked over dominoes that led to the Calamity. But what if that wasn't the only thing? I'm real worried about what Laryn is doing. What does she have in mind? What does she want this artifact for? Even before any of the Vespan stuff happened, at least until she wasn't aware of at this point, she talks about like, this is the moment I've been waiting for, when she finds out that reading is 0.5. What is she planning? And is it, I don't think she's evil, but it might be something selfish or something.
No, I got that entire implication, like the hubris of, she even says something like, I've everything I've basically, and I can't think of the phrasing, but
like sacrifice for this. Or,
thank you. Maybe her marriage is now implied to be worth it because they finally gotten to this point. I think in the opening of this is a story of grief and betrayal. I don't think it's just the betrayal gods. I think we're going to see some of our party turn against one another. And I think you're spot on. I think Laryn is the most obvious choice for that. She's already vying for the artifacts of Vespan Chloris. This is clearly a really big moment, but I don't think she's evil. I don't envision like sort of like this transition to like a cackling,
yeah.
I envision, it's like it's someone who genuinely feels like they're doing the right thing and the right thing for all people. And it's like Locke with on Lost, where he smashes the computer and the bunker starts to self-destruct.
Yeah,
he looks at Desmond and he's like, I was wrong. Like I if something like that doesn't happen, I will be surprised. But I envision Laryn full charging ahead on this, and then in the final moments, wow, I've made a huge mistake.
Yeah, so, I'm on the same page, and I think that whatever Vespan did was the first thing that happened, but I think if nothing else happened, the Calamity would probably, or at least the Betrayer Gods would not be freed. I think whatever Laryn is going to do with shifting the ley lines and the planes is going to be what allows them to escape.
And it's a nice little touch on the story, in the sense of like, it's, especially if it's done in a way where like the history books, so to speak, she never goes down in the history books as being the architect for the whole thing. And yet she being the one who is actually more to blame than Vespan Chloris. I think that would just be I think you've pointed out would be a really crazy cool detail.
Yeah.
If it does happen that way.
Yeah. So. And I wonder, and these are things we'll find out, but I want to know what she has in mind and how that disenchanted solar bow is going to help her get there. I assume it's just maybe component materials for some like spell she wants to do or something. Speaking of that solar bow, though, not to cut you off if you had more.
I actually need to wrap up.
Oh, okay.
But let's keep going as best we can. And I apologize for people watching. I just, it's the dad life.
Yeah, no worries. And if you need to go, that's fine.
No, yeah, let's go for another like 10 minutes maybe, and then I gotta.
All right.
10 minutes at most, I guess.
All right. Let me get my biggest things, which definitely this bow. We know that whatever Vespan was doing, I think, did something and then perhaps summoned a solar for a sacrifice. Maybe he didn't summon it. Maybe the solar came as like a defense mechanism to whatever.
Right. Maybe it was a trap of some kind.
Yeah, whatever they were attempting.
Because I think either Sarat or someone says they noticed both the presence of celestial and infernal runes.
Yeah.
So the implication I got also was the same thing, was that there was some kind of like bringing of both sides to this one spot.
Yeah, and what's going on there? But second, maybe even a solar is like a prison guard, for lack of a better word, to where the Betrayer Gods are being imprisoned. Like maybe it was the first step to maybe breaching that jail. But one interesting thing I wanted to share is that in, I think it's Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, but one of the source books, there was a named solar, and I'm gonna be pronouncing this wrong, but it's Xalicas, Zalicus maybe, who was the right hand of Corlon, who is like a deity of arcane magic and the Fae and stuff. And so anyway, the lore of this solar was that they were injured during the Calamity so badly that they never recovered. She lost her ability to fly, to see, and her ability to leave the material plane. So like she could not go back to like the celestial plane. And apparently it took her over 100 years to even be able to move again. And during that time, there just was like a motionless body in the wildlands. And once able to actually move again, just wandered around Wildmount, hoping to like repair the damages of the Calamity. So to me, that sounds awful like maybe the origin story for the solar that lost its weapon. And
bro, what a great pickup. Yeah, I'm reading on the wiki about her. What an awesome detail. Yeah, that could be really cool. That could be an awesome pickup for sure.
So I'm just excited to hear maybe more about what actually happened in that moment, and if this is one in the same solar, or maybe we have yet to meet Zalicus, but they're clearly tied to the Calamity, so I feel like we might see her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, that's cool. Okay, yeah, what an awesome detail. Yeah, I'm reading the whole biography. This is really cool. So, okay, that's why we need more source book stuff, man, especially with this series coming out. Like some of these details are pretty cool.
For sure. And basically, the only other things I had were just nerding out on some of the lore, so I'll spare that for now. But maybe in the next episode or something.
We'll save some more time on our next episode, because I'm sure the recap will be a little bit shorter too.
Yeah,
so we'll have a little bit more time to talk about it
for sure.
I think for those watching, I think other cool little details that you guys picked up on, I think throw it in the comments and we can all kind of enjoy it together. Anything else you wanted to talk about, Will, for tonight?
I don't think so. Just shout out to Travis playing a detective noir. He killed it.
Right. So, okay, cool. Well, let's do a thumbnail. What should we do?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe this, I don't know if this really will read, but like Brennan scaring and Travis being like terrified.
Yeah, sure. Which one do you want to be?
I'll be the jump scare if you want to be the scared one.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, you guys enjoy the episode tonight, and we'll be back to talk about episode 2. And in the meantime, you can follow our Twitter at the Pixelists. And other than that, catch you later.
Yep. Have a good one, y'all.
See ya.
Bye.